Layla was a woman in her 30s, married to a kind man named Ahmed. They lived together in a small house with Ahmed's large family. Life was simple and full of challenges, as Ahmed worked hard to secure a better future for his family. After years of hard work, Ahmed managed to save enough money to buy a new house. "I found the perfect house for us, Layla," Ahmed said excitedly. "It's in a brand new building in a quiet area." Layla felt happiness and excitement. Finally, they would have their own privacy and enough space for themselves and their young child, Youssef. She began to dream about arranging and decorating the house to make it a warm haven for them all. The awaited day arrived, and the family moved into their new home. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a modern building, surrounded by trees and beautiful gardens. As soon as she entered the apartment, Layla felt a sense of comfort and admiration for the modern decor and large windows, offering a splendid view. After they finished unpacking and arranging the apartment, Layla decided to explore the building and meet the neighbors. She took Youssef by the hand and went down to the ground floor, where there was a common lounge. In the common lounge, Layla met a group of women who were sitting and chatting. They welcomed her warmly and introduced themselves. There was Mrs. Mariam, a woman in her 50s, Mrs. Nadia, a woman in her 40s, and Mrs. Sarah, a young woman in her 20s. After the greetings and courtesies, the conversation took an unexpected turn. Mrs. Mariam said seriously, "Welcome to the building, Layla. We hope your stay here is comfortable, but there is something you should know." Layla was puzzled by the serious tone and asked, "What is it?" Mrs. Nadia replied, "This building is not what it seems. Strange things happen here." The women began to tell strange stories about the building. Mrs. Sarah talked about mysterious sounds heard at night and doors opening and closing by themselves. Mrs. Mariam added that a ghostly woman was occasionally seen on the upper floor, recounting frightening experiences some residents had. Layla, smiling skeptically, said, "I suppose you're joking, right?" Mrs. Nadia answered seriously, "We wish it were a joke, but we want to warn you, some residents couldn't bear what happens here and left." Layla didn't believe what the women said. She thought they might not want new neighbors. She returned to her apartment and told Ahmed what she had heard. Ahmed laughed and said, "Don't worry, these are just superstitions. People like to talk about ghosts and strange phenomena." But as days passed, Layla began to notice strange things. Youssef would wake up at night and cry intensely for no apparent reason. She heard footsteps in the corridors late at night and saw cupboard doors open and close without any intervention. One night, Layla woke up to the sound of childish laughter coming from Youssef's room. She quickly entered the room to find Youssef sleeping peacefully, but felt the presence of someone else. The lights flickered in a strange manner. She started to feel real fear. The next morning, she called Mrs. Mariam and asked to talk. They sat together in the common lounge, and Layla recounted what had happened. Mrs. Mariam, concerned, said, "You are starting to feel what we feel. This building is indeed haunted, and it seems the spirits are becoming aware of your presence." Layla returned to her apartment and decided she needed to learn more about the building's history. She started researching archives and local books and discovered that the land on which the building was constructed was the site of an old, tragic event. Years ago, There was an old house here that had caught fire, killing its inhabitants, and it was said that the victims' spirits still haunted the place. With the increasing strange phenomena, Layla and Ahmed faced a tough choice. Should they leave the building and search for a new place, or try to confront the horror and find a way to get rid of it? After Layla finished preparing her new home, and it was perfect, she decided to invite the women of the building to get to know them better. She prepared a table decorated with food and sweets, and sent invitations to all the neighbors. On the appointed day, Layla was preparing to receive her guests. The women began arriving one by one, exchanging conversations and pleasantries. The atmosphere was warm and fun, and everyone enjoyed the conversation and food. While Layla was busy welcoming the guests, she heard a knock on the door. Without thinking, she opened the door to welcome the new guest. But as soon as she opened the door, she felt a strange coldness running through her body and found no one in front of the door. She immediately remembered the women's warnings and felt intense horror. She returned to the main room, but noticed that the guests were staring at her with concern and fear. Mrs. Merriam said anxiously, "Did you open the door for whoever knocked?" Layla answered hesitantly, "Yes, but there was no one there." The women exchanged glances and began to show signs of tension. One by one, they started leaving, excusing that they had urgent business to attend to. Within minutes, Layla was alone in her home, overwhelmed with guilt and fear. That night, when Layla went to sleep, she had a terrifying nightmare. She saw a frightening woman with distorted features approaching her and whispering in a low voice, "You opened the door for me. Now you will live in hell." Layla woke up terrified, drenched in a cold sweat. She could not forget the woman's frightening features and her words that still echoed in her mind. After that night, Layla began to notice strange things happening in the house. The lights were flashing randomly, and the doors were opening and closing on their own. She began to hear mysterious whispers and laughter coming from the dark corners of the house. Things got worse when she started seeing the shadow of the scary woman in the bathroom mirror and in the corners of the rooms. She felt like she was constantly being watched, and whenever she tried to close her eyes, she would see the woman's terrifying face. As the days passed, Layla's health began to noticeably deteriorate. She became pale and tired, and her face began to show signs of stress. She could no longer sleep due to constant nightmares, and felt like she was losing her mind. Even Ahmed noticed the big change in his wife. He said to her anxiously, "Layla, what's going on? You look very tired." But Layla couldn't explain what was happening to her. She was afraid Ahmed would think she was losing her mind, so she would say, "It's just stress and exhaustion." One night, while Layla was sitting in the living room, she heard footsteps coming towards her. She felt a coldness spread through her body and froze in place. The scary woman appeared in front of her, slowly approaching and whispering, "You opened the door for me, and there is no escape now." Layla started screaming, attracting the attention of Ahmed, who rushed into the room. But he saw nothing but his terrified wife. He tried to calm her down, but she was shaking violently. Layla realized she needed help. She remembered the warnings of the women in the building and decided to return to them to ask for advice. She met Mrs. Mariam and told her everything that had happened. Mrs. Mariam said seriously, You made a big mistake by opening that door. Now, we must find a way to close it and keep this evil spirit away from you." Layla realized that the journey to confront this horror and protect her family had only just begun, and she would need great courage and strength to face what awaited her. After continuous attempts to find a solution and the deterioration of her psychological state, Layla decided that the best option to protect herself and her family was to leave the building and sell the apartment. She told Ahmed her decision, and he agreed after seeing her suffering. "We have to leave, Ahmed. This place is not safe for us or our baby," Layla said determinedly. They started making arrangements to move and sell the apartment. Time was passing very slowly, and every moment in the apartment, Layla felt that she was under the surveillance of the evil spirit. As they were preparing to leave, the spiritual attacks increased. One night, Layla felt a cold hand choking her while she was sleeping. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. She suddenly woke up, breathing hard, and knew that the spirit was trying to prevent them from leaving. Another night, Layla heard Yusef's cries coming from his room. She ran to him to find him crying loudly and terrified. Yusef also saw the scary woman who threatened to kill them all if they tried to escape. On moving day, frightening events began to escalate in an unprecedented manner. The lights in the apartment went out, and objects started flying randomly into the air. Layla and Ahmed were trying to quickly pack the rest of their luggage. While they were in the middle of preparations, the spirit clearly appeared in front of Layla, its face full of anger and evil. The spirit tried to attack Layla forcefully, but Ahmed quickly intervened to keep her away from harm. They finally managed to escape from the apartment and leave the building behind. They got into the car and quickly left, moving away from the cursed place. As they drove away, Layla was breathing deeply, trying to calm herself down after everything she had been through. The family moved to a new place, far away from the cursed building. Although they hoped for a fresh start, Layla couldn't completely shake the terrifying memories. Some strange events continued to occur, but their frequency decreased over time. Layla began undergoing psychotherapy to deal with the trauma she experienced. She told her therapist all the horrific details, trying to understand what happened and recover from it. "I still feel afraid when I hear knocks on the door, but I am trying to overcome this fear," Layla said quietly. Years passed, and Layla regained some semblance of normal life. But she never forgot what happened in that building. One night, as she was closing the windows before bed, she heard a soft knock on the door. She froze, remembering everything. Ahmed got up and headed towards the door. "Don't worry, I'll check it out," he said quietly. Ahmed slowly opened the door, but no one was there. He went back to Layla to tell her there was nothing. But when Layla turned toward the corridor, she saw a familiar shadow disappearing into the darkness. That night, Layla dreamed of the return of the spirit. She saw the scary woman approaching her and whispering in a mysterious voice, "I'm always here, Layla. There's no way out." Layla woke up terrified, feeling that the spirit was still haunting her. She knew that the end had not yet come, that there was something waiting for her in the darkness.